what are you going to focus on today? Every day we have a choice what we're going to focus on. The problem is that most people will allow the environment or their circumstances or their relationships to actually control their focus for them. And then when something goes wrong, that's what they focus on, and only that, sometimes to the expense of everything else. But in reality, the only limit to our focus is in our own mind. So it's basically limitless. All human behavior is controlled by two basic impulses: the desire to avoid pain and the desire to gain pleasure. It's built into our psychology. There's no escaping it, but we can actually use it to our advantage when we become aware of it and when we learn to use our focus. So what we choose to focus on is either going to cause pain or it's going to cause pleasure in the present, but also in the future. I'll give you an example. So there's this beautiful example of focus. This week I was teaching my daughter how to ride a bicycle without training wheels for the first time. Think back to when you first started to learn how to ride a bicycle, or maybe you were teaching your kids how to ride a bicycle. What's the most important thing when you're learning that skill? It's focus, right? I was helping her and I would be running along beside her and I kept telling her, look forward at where you want to go. And she would look straight ahead and she was doing great. And she was, it was smooth sailing. But when she focused on something else, when she looked at the curb or she looked down, she lost her focus and she crashed. She didn't get hurt. She got a couple of scraped knees, but she was totally fine. But how often do we focus on what we're afraid of instead of what we want? I think there's two keys to remember here. When we focus on what we're afraid of, we're actually going to go toward it. The thing is about focus is that what we focus on, we tend to get more of. So if you're focusing on being afraid, you're going to get more fear. If you focus on being overwhelmed, you're going to feel overwhelmed. So if we're looking at the curb, if we're looking at that fear in our life, we're just going to steer toward it. That's just how it works. Whatever we focus on, we move toward. The other thing is, every once in a while, when she was learning how to ride her bike, she would look down at her bicycle. Instead of looking forward at her goal, she was trying to figure out how she was going to get there. And how often do we, instead of laser focusing on our goals, we look down at how is this actually going to work? So stay focused on your goals. And like I said, what we focus on, we tend to get more of. The thing is, you can use it the other way too. If you're focusing on laughter, if you're focusing on joy and love, then you get more of that too. So how many of us will spend more time focusing on what we don't have than what we do have, right? And here's the thing, people are going to tell you, what do you have to be happy about anyway? Look at everything that's going wrong. Or what do we have to be happy about, right? Maybe it's a friend or it's a family member, or maybe you tell yourself that. Focus controls your destiny. Tony Robbins says, what's wrong is always available, but so is what's right. So why don't we focus on what's right? I think there's three basic internal myths that we tell ourselves about focus. And most of these are totally subconscious. It's not something that we, consciously tell ourselves. But there's three myths that I think if you could get some clarity on, you'd be able to start shifting your focus a lot quicker. So the first myth is focus is fixed. So basically, a lot of people think that it's a constant, and whatever bombards our mind, that's what we have to focus on. But in reality, focus, it can be redirected with intention and with practice. And over time, you can learn to shift your focus. It's like steering a ship. So you have the power to choose your own direction, right? Myth number 2 is focusing on problems solves them. Here's the thing. It's so easy to just zero in on what's wrong, but focusing on that problem, a lot of times it makes it worse, right? It doesn't actually make it better. So instead, shift your focus to solutions and opportunities. Is there something I'm missing in this problem? Is there a solution here that I'm not seeing? And then this will change your perspective and can totally transform challenges into stepping stones. And that's one of the biggest things in life to remember. That's one of the most fundamental skills, is being able to turn an obstacle into a learning opportunity. Instead of looking at that as something that's in your way, look at it as a challenge that will make you stronger. And myth number 3 is focus is only for the present. And basically, what I mean is I can only focus on what's happening right now. I think this really limits your potential. Now, here's the thing. Focusing on the moment is important and it's essential, but true mastery of focus, it's about aligning your focus with your future goals. It's about learning how to connect your future goals with pleasure and how to avoid the pain. That long-term vision is going to propel you forward, even when the present is challenging. Tony Robbins again says, where focus goes, energy flows. So where are you directing your focus? Where are you gaining that pain, that pleasure, and avoiding that pain? Because your focus is constantly doing one of those two things. So I want to ask you, what if you changed your focus just for a second? What's the worst thing that could happen if you shifted from fear to faith or from uncertainty to courage? What do you think could change for you in your life if you just made a slight focus shift? Now, here's the thing: are the circumstances immediately going to go away? No, probably not. But the way you show up drastically changes when you change what you focus on. It's time to start controlling your own focus instead of letting all of your circumstances and all of the things around you and your environment control it for you. You have the choice on what to focus on. You experience the life that you focus on. And how are you going to use that focus?